Okay, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's a June 2nd special meeting, I think. We'll start, as ever, with the Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the New Mexico flag in English and in Spanish, as well as the acknowledgement of tribal land. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo de Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el símbolo Zia de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. And the acknowledgement of tribal land. We acknowledge that our Board of Education meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the Tesuque Pueblo lands and other tribal lands on which we stand. We honor these people, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in New Mexico and in our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization. Thank you. We will move on to approval of the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
second.
I'm reading the wrong agenda. It's not June 2nd. Goodness, that makes way more sense and why it says special meeting on the agenda now. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Gonzalez has moved approval of the agenda. Do we have a second? Board Member Anderson has seconded. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Moving on to Roman numeral 2, introduction of interpreter. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble and members of the board. With us tonight, Deputy Superintendent Romero will introduce our interpreter.
Para asistencia con la traducción en español, la señora Carla González te ayudará.
Thank you very much. Roman numeral 3, public forum. As ever, we are accepting emails and I believe even a virtual option as well as in-person option. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble and members of the board. Public forum tonight is with Mr. Cody Donarski, our Public Information Officer.
Awesome. Good evening, Board President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. There's 2 people signed up for public forum comment tonight. Rules for public forum. Public forum includes online and/or virtual participation as needed, as well as in-person comments when the board holds in-person meetings. Please listen and speak with respect. No uncivil conduct will be permitted. Please do not discuss any specific student who is not your own. There will be no sharing of time. Self-monitor and observe the 3-minute time limit. I will give you a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. Public commentary and dialogue is only allowed or are only allowed during the public forum, not throughout the meeting. Please search for answers on common ground. You may speak on any topic, whether it is on the agenda or not. Your input will be taken into consideration. Please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law, the board cannot take action on items that are not on the agenda. Please do not discuss employee matters which may result in disciplinary action. Instead, notify the employee supervisor, the Human Resources Department, or the superintendent. First comment tonight is from Karen Thomas. This is a plea to the powers that be to recognize the importance of band in Santa Fe High School. Not only should it be recognized, but it should be adequately funded for a full-time director and assistant directors. The current band director has worked wonders with the marching band / concert band program. This growing band went to state this year under Mr. Bellin's direction, and held their own. This program should be supported in every way possible to help it continue to grow and thrive. Please don't make cuts to the program. Music saves lives, no exaggeration there. Thank you for doing the right thing in helping not only maintain but grow the Santa Fe High School Band. This is from Karen Thomas, if I didn't mention that at the beginning. And the last comment is from Mary Miller. What are you doing about our children's safety and keeping intruders out of our schools? And that concludes public forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donarski. Is there anyone present who would like to address the board who did not sign in or email in for public forum? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Roman numeral 4 is our action item, the 2022-2023 operating budget. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. We are here tonight to present to you the operating budget for FY23. And if my team, when you get an opportunity to speak, please introduce yourself and your title. Again, Mr. Martinez and I will take most of the slides this evening, but we will also have some team members that jump in.
Madam President,
Yes.
is it possible before we get started on the presentation to have a moment of silence for the school shooting this week, please?
Of course. Thank you very much, Secretary Bozé. Appreciate the reminder. Let's take a moment of silence to think about the victims of the horrific gun violence in Texas and their families who are affected, in the whole community and country that is mourning another event like this. Thank you very much. And on this presentation, board members, it's meaty enough. I'm inclined to say we should let them go through the whole thing and then ask questions, slide by slide as we go. Okay, if that feels right to you all. I don't feel terribly strongly, but I think we might as well go through the whole thing and then do our questions. So it's okay. All right, thank you. Please go ahead.
All right. As we mentioned, again, the operating budget will be presented to you tonight. On slide 2, just an overview of what we'll be walking you through this evening. Again, anything we do, or everything we do, is to enhance teaching and learning. And so we want to make sure that that's the common theme of our presentation tonight. We will be walking through the review of the proposed FY23 operational and operating budget. And then again, at the end, we'll stand for questions. Santa Fe Public Schools, we do have a strong 3-year plan to address learning loss. That also includes phasing in, as we've mentioned at previous board meetings, standards-based learning and grading, which we really do feel it's going to address the learning loss and also accelerated learning. The way we're going to sustain this, because it is funded through ESSER, is building capacity within our site staff, district and site staff. So when it is fully funded and implemented 2 years from now, we will be able to sustain it without any additional funding due to the capacity building of staff at sites and within the district. As you know, we are trying to forge community partnerships for high-quality after-school programs and also for summer programs. And again, that is funded through our ESSER or federal stimulus that we receive. We do want to focus this upcoming school year on absenteeism and re-engagement. We really do feel strongly if we can help students attend school and engage actively in their learning, we will be more successful in moving the academic needle and really providing a safe place for them to learn. As we're walking through this presentation tonight, some of the key items that we'll be discussing is staffing, instruction, some social-emotional learning and support, which we refer to as SEL, student enrollment, the trends, technology, and also site funding.
Thank you, President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez.
Moving on, staffing is the greatest impact on the operational budget. 65% of the SEG, which is the operational budget, funding is designated towards salaries. 91% goes towards the salaries, additional compensation, and benefits. The cost of the 7% raise, as we've visited a couple times, are the $4.9 million. Everyone except the superintendent will receive that 7% raise. Santa Fe Public Schools uses non-recurring federal and special revenues for programmatic supply, technology, and other needs to supplement the budget. As you can see, a majority of, as I mentioned, the SEG is funded for salaries, so we need those other special revenue funding sources to come into play. Right sizing for FY23 conforms to student enrollment in the CBA. We talked earlier about, or not earlier, but in the last presentation about decline in enrollment. So the right sizing is just conforming to what the actual student enrollment is and what the CBA is and what requires of the district from the CBA. 31 FTEs are impacted. No staff have lost a position for school year 22-23. Vacant positions have been absorbed and the number of classes adjusted based on the enrollment for school year 22-23.
And I do want to add, when we talk about the raises, it's a minimum of 7% for all staff, but many will receive much higher. And we've explained the tier that they moved, tier movement. Also, we're still going through negotiations. When we bring that for ratification, then there could be some additional adjustments as far as what the raises would look like. Just want to make note, when we talk about the 31 FTEs that were impacted, again, no staff have lost their job, and it is based on enrollment. So there are shifts. There are staff moving from maybe one side or grade level to another due to enrollment trends. We did consolidate about 5 FTEs from the district that were no longer being used, and we consolidated those responsibilities into other duties as assigned.
And also, I would like to make a note on the 7% raise, and thank you, Superintendent Chavez, for that information. Staff does see a little bit larger of an increase than that by the board taking on the initiative of approving and carrying the increase to the employee contribution as well.
Santa Fe Public Schools, we're really striving to increase and enhance our HR department. Over the next 3 years, we have allocated $893,000 of ESSER funding to really help us recruit and retain. Some of the initiatives will be job fairs, advertising. We're helping out some of our visiting teachers with the visa processing. That was a big ask of teachers because they do want to stay with Santa Fe Public Schools, but they need that assistance to maintain that visa and continue to teach with us. Additional recruiting of staff, the alternative licensure support, which we do help offset the cost of teachers going through that. National board support, improved communications and HR restructuring in FY22, and also something we've heard, early child care starting in FY23 has helped retain and also recruit teachers. As we're going through a future board meeting, we will present reorg of our HR department, also some of the new expectations, and also give our new executive director of HR an opportunity to introduce herself and also speak a little bit.
Santa Fe Public Schools uses an equity lens to enhance teaching and learning, and in doing so, other funding sources are instrumental in achieving that, such as the SEG, which is the operational, ARP and ESSER 3, HB 33, SB 9, and ETN. Key budgetary factors are ESSER for the 3-year period, which includes standards-based teaching and learning, culturally relevant professional development, and fine arts. There were no cuts to fine arts for fiscal year 23 or school year 22-23. Included is the $11.2 million for enhancement of teaching and learning to further equity. The CCTE, College and Career Technical Education, included $3.3 million for reimagining Santa Fe Public Schools. The SEG for culturally relevant English language arts adoption, and also the HB 33, SB 9, and ETN for school sites' unique needs. Mentioned before that HB 33, SB 9 is really structured around the property, plant, equipment, maintenance needs, construction, custodial, those types of things.
I do want to add one thing. When we talk about budget for next year in departments, they'll be budgeted off of actuals over the last few years. And so when we're looking at it, it could seem like a department may receive a reduction in their budget, but it's based off of actuals and research that Mr. Martinez and his department have made. So it helps us prevent encumbrance of funding and helps us really stay solvent.
Correct. And in doing so, we went back even years before COVID, just to make sure that, you know, custodial budgets were budgeted properly. You know, instructional support was also budgeted properly. So we took a broad look at that from even pre-pandemic.
Santa Fe Public Schools, we really want to make sure that our students are taken care of, and that goes through our SEL, our social emotional learning and needs. Within this grouping, we have currently the second step curriculum. Under development, the bullying curriculum and a plan that we would present at a future board meeting. We currently have school-based health centers and again, district-wide community school application when available. Currently, it's site by site, but when there is a district-wide community school application, which we're hearing over the next few months could be issued, we would take a look at that as far as something we may want to explore. Again, a lot of funding from ESSER and Medicaid help us cover other sources. $1.2 million of ESSER under the COVID Response and Physical Health Act. We have a little over $500,000 in ESSER under social, emotional, and mental health. We also have Medicaid absorbing $864,000 for nurses, nurses' aides, and counselors. And as we're continuing along that line, you know, we continue to try to phase in the 5-year implementation that was mentioned at a 2019 school board meeting when you approved the budget. And just to give you a recap from that point to current, at that time, the school district wanted to increase what we offered as far as nurses, nurses' aides, counselors, and library specialists. At that time, it was 39 FTEs, which is full-time equivalency, and currently we're at 47 nurses and aides. Now, I do have to say the pandemic pushed us to get there. It's not just that we were able to include 8 additional nurses and aides, but it really did help us move in the right direction. Counselors, 48, and currently at 39. Library specialists, asked of 39, and we're currently at 23. Now again, just like any other position that we have, it is a struggle to find certified individuals, not only in these areas, but also to be in the classroom as teachers or EAs. So we'll continue to push forward and try to meet the expectations that was laid in front of us in 2019. As we mentioned, learning through SEL, our Native American Student Services, or better known as NAS, is receiving $500,000 for each of the next 5 years from substance abuse and mental health services, and also an MPED for the Project Aware Mental Health Services. Again, this is to service Native American students at Santa Fe High and Capitol, grades 9 through 12. We have a contract with Serenity Wellness to provide 2 full-time therapists and 1 project manager, and Santa Fe Public Schools will hire 2 full-time peer navigators. Our goal is to increase awareness of mental health, substance use, and also co-occurring issues among school-age youth, and also to promote resilience and building a mental health well-building for school-age youth. I do want to also add that over the next 3 years, we have allocated $150,000 of ESSER funding to cover all students at all grade levels. This slide does show 9 through 12, and that's what this focus is on, but we have provided additional funding to make sure that students of all grade levels are also covered. As we talk about recruitment, we do know we lost 400 students, and that was a $2.2 million impact to our budget. Some of the plans that we would like to help us in retaining students, but also recruiting, is a revamped attendance plan, When you see what it's labeled as, ESSER under $1.76 million, it was the plan that we presented at the previous board meeting when we talked about ESSER. So as you see that, that means it was within those categories. Summer and after-school programming, CCTE and internship programs, retaining neighborhood schools and offering alternatives such as Desert Sage Academy, who has currently an enrollment, at this time it was 500, but I think Mr. G announced it was close to 550 students. Facility improvements for Mandela and ECO through the GO Bond, near-peer tutoring through a PED grant, Capstone Projects, and again, I want to mention some of the students that graduated over the last 2 days and tomorrow did utilize that Capstone project to meet the requirements needed to receive their high school diploma. Again, social media and community outreach, and we think that we have a great team over there doing wonderful things with social media and also video. So again, we'll continue to push the envelope forward to try to really retain and also recruit future students.
And Superintendent Chavez, if I may, just to remind the board that we are funded off of the average of the 80th and the 120th day. So the decline in the enrollment was from the 80th and the 120th day average from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, which is the funding for FY23. As Superintendent Chavez mentioned, Desert Sage possibly being at 550 enrollment. We do see a unit value adjustment around February, which the Public Education Department does adjust our 40th day to reflect that. So any increase in enrollment will be funded around that time.
Current and future enrollment impacts, and this is based off of our Santa Fe Public Schools Facility Master Plan. Within that plan, it does note that 65% of students in the district attend Santa Fe Public Schools, and hopefully we can increase that. Fewer than 100 students transfer to Santa Fe Public Schools from outside the district. Now, we did have some graduates at Desert Sage that were in other states, so hopefully we can attract them from outside our state. Santa Fe County is projected to gain just over 8,000 in population by 2040. Again, birth rates have been at a decline, not only within the city, but state and national averages as well. Again, it is the most significant driver of public school enrollment, and school-age population grew slightly, was projected to grow slightly in 2040 between the ages of 5 and 10. Enrollment in younger grades, especially kindergarten and first grade, plummeted in 2021, and enrollment through higher grade levels were mixed. So we did see increases at some sites, but we did see the majority of our schools see a decline.
Good evening. Sorry about that. Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. My name is Neil Weaver. I'm the Chief Information and Strategy Officer for Santa Fe Public Schools. And I just wanted to briefly talk about a few of the changes that we've seen in technology when it comes to supporting teaching and learning over the last couple of years. We've had significant staffing changes, and really those are around reorganization within the department. We've added a security department who makes sure that our network and our student data is safe and secure. We've added digital learning coach staff, and we've also just looked at how we could reorganize to be more effective. The student internet connectivity study that Santa Fe Public Schools really championed led us to a nationwide conclusion that the devices that students are using really do matter. Prior, our focus was to get Chromebooks in in a very cost-effective manner. And we've realized that we need to look at better Chromebooks, more effective, higher capacity, better antennas, different things like this. The cost of our Chromebooks have moved from about $250 a piece to a little over $380, which makes a difference of almost $500,000 a year. Our network and data security, we've had consistent upgrades over the last 2 years to the tune of over $2 million. Most of these are planned, but as you might imagine, some of these are not. We've had severe supply chain issues, just like the rest of the world. A lot of the costs there are unknown and unseen as of yet. We've seen an exponential growth in the digital resources that we're purchasing and supporting within our district. And as I spoke at the last meeting, we've increased our internet circuit over the last 3 years from 1 gig to 5 gigs, and we'll be increasing to 10 gigs with the memo that you guys, that the board approved last weekend. And that's all at a cost-neutral impact to the district. Looking forward.
Sorry, Dr. Weaver, just a quick
of
note
course.
that Vice President Garcia has arrived.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you. Moving forward, technology stands ready to support any of the teaching and learning initiatives that the district brings forth. We see a great opportunity in the continued growth and support of our learning management system, which allows our students to learn wherever they are. So whether it's live, whether it's online, hybrid. We also see this as a way to help with our teacher shortage. If we do not have teachers at specific schools, we could support classes between schools that are conducted online. We are working with teachers currently to reimagine what our computer labs look like. So computer labs that are computers in a row are no longer effective and they're no longer used. So we're really looking at how can we bring in engaging materials and tools for students, such as robotics, coding equipment, 3D printers, and the like. We'll continue to grow and expand our computer science initiative, which has had great successes at many of our schools. We've seen some incredible growth in our students around the skills that they're using in all content areas in computer science. And I think one of the most exciting things that we're seeing are just really the opportunities that are presented to our district because we have set the stage and we have ensured that the technology is present and able to support. And I'm talking about our Learning Designer program. We've put a Communities of Practice program together. We had over 75 teachers and principals who came to volunteer at a computer science learning day on a Saturday a couple of weeks ago, and it's these types of opportunities that I think are going to continue to set Santa Fe Public Schools apart. And I just want to wrap up by saying that we just really are here to ensure that the technology equipment and the systems are ready to support the learning that will be present next year and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. So we're moving on, and we start talking about site funding through an equity lens. We'll start walking you through Title I at-risk and what it looks like at the site level as far as how SACs are involved. So right now, we want to talk about how the at-risk formula works, and we've provided the definition from New Mexico statute because that is a very valid question. What does at-risk mean, and how is it calculated? So again, that at-risk funding is allocated through the 910B5, which teases out the funding avenues and notes to us what we're funded for. Could be at-risk, could be Title I. It's many, many factors, but it does show us what we're funded for in these specialty areas. Again, Title I, and this is very important because it does tie to our SACs and also to many of our schools. If I remember, Mr. Martinez, 21 of our schools are receiving Title I funding?
Correct.
And so, again, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act, provides financial assistance to local education agencies, or what's better known as LEAs, and also schools with high numbers and high percentages of children from low-income families.
Madam President, really quick, Mr. Martinez, can you introduce yourself? Because I want you to, as well as Dr. Weaver, as into what you guys do.
Yes, sure thing. Vice President Garcia, I am the CFO, Chief Financial Officer for the Santa Fe Public School District.
Thank you.
I also want to make note, when you see that last sentence, it's very important. Funds may not be used for non-instructional activities such as building maintenance, repairs, landscaping, and so on. It's really support strategies at the classroom level. Okay. It also, some of this funding can be allocated for staff and salaries to provide that support to our kids and students at all sites that are eligible. When we're taking a look at, go ahead. Yep, not every school receives Title I funding. Again, we have 21 schools that will receive it under special revenue. Title I funding is $2.9 million and supports 27 FTEs for next school year. Our at-risk funding for FY23 is $10 million, and it is built into the SEG, as we mentioned earlier. Schools with higher number of at-risk students will, simply put, receive more funding. In the past, Santa Fe Public Schools has budgeted at-risk funding for instructional staff, social workers, school nurses, and also community and schools. Allowable funding, allowable at-risk funding can incorporate some of these things. We gave a list of it, but there's many things. They don't have to fund them all. They can pick and choose. But again, case management, tutoring, reading interventions, culturally relevant professional development. Also, we can compensate strategies for high-need schools, whole school interventions, including school-based health centers and community schools. And again, educational programming to really help us address the needs at these sites for these specific students. Again, it is really services can help engage and support parents and families in the education of the students. So it does provide us an opportunity to help educate our families about what their students are going to receive inside the classroom. Per HB 6 or House Bill 6, and it's also the State Equalization Guarantee or the SEG for FY21 and subsequent years, school districts need to provide an explanation to this narrative, a narrative explaining the identified services to improve academic success of at-risk students. Within our ed plan for 2022 and 23, Santa Fe Public Schools reported that PED, that the way we want to improve school conditions and also improve outcomes for our Native American students, students with disabilities, our EL learners, bilingual program students, and at-risk students. And we provided this narrative for approval on the way we are going to spend our at-risk funding. The SACs, when the school year begins for 22-23, will reconvene and also provide input into site budgets in the areas that they can have additional say for programming, needs of students and schools, and also we will talk about the budget templates in the next few slides.
Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. The site funding templates, the locked budget template items that are based on student enrollment and programming include administration, secretary, classroom teachers, grades K through 12, special teachers such as art, PE, music, library, technology. Also, there's educational assistants known as EAs, counselors, nurse, and nurse aides. The unlocked site allocations, which...
Mr. Martinez,
okay.
I just want to explain when we talk about locked and unlocked. Locked is sales or funding that is required by the state. So it could be the FTEs, as we mentioned, your administrator or assistant principals, secretaries, counselors, nurses, and nurses' aides. SACs do not contribute to the discussion of how staffing is going to take place on their sites. So when we talk about locked, it's the funding and the positions that is really developed with the district and the site staff based on the needs of each individual school and enrollment.
And also the CBA.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the site funding template for the unlocked site allocations, which include SAC input. Supply, services, software, and materials, PD, professional development, ESSER funds, the family income index funds, and Title I funds. So as you'll see on this template, they have the ability to provide input for the supplies and materials of the instruction, regular ed, maintenance, office of the principal, and professional development, just out of here on the operational.
And as we move into bilingual and multicultural education, I think it was a few board meetings back, we did approve the application for $2.29 million of state funding for the following schools. And just like some of the previous funding streams, it is based on student enrollment and how they qualify. So as you know, El Camino Real Academy is one of our larger schools, especially K-8, and so they do receive a higher funding for bilingual and multicultural education. So it is based on what programming needs are currently or in future cases at some of our schools, but also student enrollment. So again, it is based on enrollment and also the needs of the students in these programs at each one of these sites. And also, if I want to add, as we mentioned with NAS, we did provide the bilingual program $150,000 through ESSER over the next 3 years to help support them. Some of the ways that that ESSER funding is being utilized to help support our bilingual students is tuition reimbursements for teachers to pursue a TESOL or bilingual endorsement, helping them offset material costs. So we want as many of our teachers to be TESOL or bilingual endorsed, and we want to help offset that cost because it does come out of their pocket. So the more we can provide to our teachers, hopefully the better instruction that our students will receive.
As part of the SEG, Santa Fe Public Schools is receiving the Family Income Index funding for 3 schools within the district. Last year, the Family Income Index was a separate allocation through an award process. This year, it was told to the district that it will be part of the SEG. Those 3 schools are El Camino Real Academy, $402,277, Ortiz Middle School, $285,977, and Salazar Elementary School, $127,733. Senate Bill 17 of 2021, Family Income Index Act, says that public schools shall use Family Income Index for the following: at least a third for both evidence-based structured literacy interventions and evidence-based mathematics instruction and interventions, up to a third for case management, tutoring and after-school and summer enrichment programs delivered by social workers, counselors, teachers, or other professional staff. Also culturally relevant professional and curriculum development to include support, language acquisition, and bilingual and multicultural education. Whole school interventions, including SEL, that's the social emotional learning programs, multi-layered systems of support, student nutrition programs, school-based health centers and community schools, instructional resources and materials, services to engage and support parents and families, and services to engage and support the tribal and communities in the education of Native American students. The FY23 local mill levy, SB 9, and the HB 33 funds, SB 9 for $17.3 million and HB 33 at $14.2 million, include, as I mentioned, a lot of property, plant, and equipment maintenance, annual maintenance needs, annual contract and equipment needs for programs such as music, art, athletics, facilities and grounds, technology. Also annual facility master plan priorities such as summer work, facility renewal, etc. Annual custodial contracts, annual emergency response such as frozen water pipes, water breaks. Also on-call construction services are part of that, electrical services. Annual response to pandemic such as maintain and update air filtration systems. And in FY23, Santa Fe Public Schools will continue to prioritize needs-based site requests out of mill levy.
Mr. Martinez, I just want to add, when we talk about the annual contract and equipment needs for these departments, it is based on a plan that they have internally to replace or refurbish equipment. And so it is within a department site plan to really work with them whenever music, art, athletics, or even facilities need something replaced or refurbished. So some of the athletic equipment and even music needs to be refurbished, or it needs to be not modified, but cleaned, updated to meet the standards of any department moving forward that our students participate in.
The music department actually has a software that's funded from mill levy, and it's software that not only inventories their instruments, but it also puts it on a repair and a replacement schedule. So it's really helpful, it's really nice, and we work through that during the budgeting process. Moving on to the special revenue student nutrition portion. Student nutrition will end fiscal year 22 with a cash balance of about $1 million, which is a significant improvement over the current or FY21 when participation rates were much lower and reimbursements were not enough to pay for salaries and meal expenses. The projection for FY23 revenue is $6.5 million, which is based on the projected participation rates for meals served and the federal reimbursements for meals served. Also includes the rollover of the FY22 cash balance. I will make a comment that the federal reimbursements for student nutrition have been very timely this year, and it has been really helpful to the district because, as we know it, the operational fund is the only fund that we can borrow from. And when you're pulling from that fund constantly for other special revenue sources, such as the federal funds, it really creates a significant impact. But I will thank the PED for getting those reimbursements done very timely this year. Also, this projection is favorable for maintaining current staffing levels and covering projected food and other operating costs to the student nutrition and food program. Also included in special revenue is the transportation fund. The transportation department is funded independently through the New Mexico Public Education Department using a formula that calculates ridership and mileage. We're seeing a slight increase in the FY23 allocation at $4 million compared to the $3.77 million that we received for FY22. Although we did receive, I think that's on the next slide, but we received allocation for FY22 that the board approved at the actual last meeting, which was to help offset the costs of the rising fuel, which it was told to us at spring budget that we could see several of those allocations next year, at least 1 to 2, but hopefully several. The allocation is projected to cover department expenses, including staff, maintenance, fuel, and other operating costs. Districts received an additional fuel allocation. Sorry, I jumped on that one, but fuel allocation in the current fiscal year that afforded Santa Fe Public Schools adequate funds to meet the department needs for this school year. The remainder of the presentation is just the following slides from the carryover from the May 19th Board of Education meeting. Nothing changed, none of the numbers changed. I don't know if the board would like to go back over that.
If you would please briefly, as we have two members who weren't here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, moving on to the presentation that we went over May 19th. There are noteworthy impacts to the operational budget. Adjustments made to address decline in student enrollment, decrease in generated units, meeting the mandated percentage and minimum increase for all employee work groups. The mandated percentage was the 7%. As we mentioned, some will receive more than 7%, but no less, besides the superintendent. The minimum increases for all employee work groups, that includes the $15 an hour minimum, level 1 to level 3 teachers, principals, and APs. Includes board priorities, both in operational and ESSER funding. We improved the estimated cash balance to 5.2%, which I'm happy to announce is back in alignment with the Board of Education policy. I'm really proud of that. The ARP and ESSER 3 funding utilized to address operational budget shortfalls, which we use Ryan Cooper's assistance and also Melissa Blaylock on really keeping us on track with that funding and also submitting the reimbursements to the PED. Budget will need to be modified in the form of budget adjustment requests, BARs, after allocations are received by the PED. The operating budget fluctuates throughout the year, and that's what the board is approving during consent. It happens through maintenance, transfer, increase, decrease, and initial budgets. So when we go through the special revenue funds, you'll see many of them are pending. So those will come through in the form of initial budget. The FY23 operational budget balancing overview, we talked about the salaries, the 7% increase to the daily rate, $4.9 million, $15 an hour minimum. $55,000. Principal, assistant principal minimum, $265,000. Teacher level 1 to level 3 minimum, $454,000. The benefits increase to the employer, $580,000, and the ERB increase to the employer is $355,000. That's a 2% increase. This current fiscal year was 1%. FY23 is a 2%. The benefits increase to the employee, which is a board priority, and is at $440,000. Three-tier teacher licensure movement at $830,000. I do want to share that I have received a lot of calls and questions from other districts on how the district budgets the benefits to the increase to the employee portion. A lot of districts don't do that. So I do want to share with my colleagues and with the board that, you know, that's something that the board does offer, and it's a great incentive to have to be an employee here. The sources of revenue, the NIMSIA risk premium, $54,000. Additional coming in, it's small, but it's worth noting. The absorbing vacant FTE, the right size adjustment, $1.2 million. Contracts, $1.085. That's not a cut in contracts. That's, as Superintendent Chavez mentioned, we are budgeting off of actuals. There are some contracts that are no longer needed because they were maybe for a service like a therapist of some sort, and now it's an FTE, so the funding needs to be moved. And was nearly double budgeted this fiscal year because we had services, but also then moved the FTE. Additional revenue, the 910B5 SEG tool, we'll see an additional $5.9 million from that. Other costs non-recurring, the utilities of $370,000 increase. As I mentioned, the estimated cash balance, about $6 million, which is the percentage of 5.2%. The FY23 initial unit value is $5,450.92. As I mentioned, the Public Education Department will release a final unit value in February for FY23. In previous years, there were times that we received another unit value after the final unit value, but for FY22, we received the initial and the final. The review of the proposed operating budget, this is just the terminology to share with the board. I know it's difficult between the operating and operational. They're very similar words, but different meanings. The operating budget describes the entire budget and includes all of the funds that the district has the authority to utilize in the operation of the district, and includes the following: operational, which is our main non-categorical fund, funded mostly from the SEG, the State Equalization Guarantee, which includes now instructional materials and the Family Income Index. As mentioned previously, those were awarded in a separate allocation, but currently part of the operational SEG. It includes other local revenues such as leases, rentals, E-rate, and also includes cash balance. Special revenue, as we went over in the previous slides, it includes transportation, nutrition services, federal, state, local grants, city-county grants. Capital outlay includes the bond, the GO bond, mill levy, which is SB 9, HB 33. Special legislative appropriations, which are funded by our legislature, and the educational technology note. Debt service is the categorical funds that we are using to pay the principal and interest of the GO, general obligation bond, and the educational technology note. Those payments happen twice a year, one with principal and interest and one just with interest. Special revenue, transportation, nutrition, federal, state, and local. Our FY23 special revenue budget is currently at 18.9, but you'll see the FY22 special revenue budget is 64 million. We have not received the allocations from the PED, and not just the allocations, but the carryover. That plays a huge role in our budget because, as we see in ESSER and ARP, that some of those awards are over a 3-year plan, maybe a 2-year plan. Every grant is different. I like to say that every grant offers its own learning curve. But the projected special revenue, those are, like I said, just pending award allocations. The board will approve those in the consent of future board meetings that will increase the operating budget. This is the budget of capital outlay. There's a few funds under here: the GO bond, special capital outlay state, HB 33, SB 9 state match, SB 9 local, SB 9 state match, and the ETN. Starting with bond building, in FY22, we budgeted 18 million. Moving into FY23, we'll have the 25.2.
And Mr. Martinez, I
Yes.
just want to add, I know it was asked at our last meeting, what is the FY23 Go Bond project plan? And I'll just give you the list according to the facilities master plan and also the CRC. First on the list is the Santa Fe High School Phase 2, and then we have ECO Phase 1 funding. We have roofing and building envelope across the district. Again, HVAC and air quality across the district, which we need to maintain to ensure a safe and clean learning environment for staff and students. Outdoor classrooms, at the last CRC, we talked about the pilot programs going on there. And then again, sustainability, the solar and expansion at Milagro, the parking.
Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. Not going to go through all of these, but the increases that you'll see in both bond and ETN, also SB9, is because of the cash balance that we're carrying over from FY22. I shared with the board previously the third quarter cash report and the audited cash balance from FY22, and that's how we come to the conclusion of what the rollover of the cash is being budgeted into FY23. Same thing with HB 33. You'll see the budget is slightly less. It's just less of a cash balance. And then there was another note I was going to make on this. The state match, 31,700, that's a reimbursement basis. Those funds revert at the end of this fiscal year. The district did use all of our 300 and 222,000, and we've already been reimbursed back those funds. Before you could use 31,703, which is the next SB9 state match cash, you had to use 31,700. The district already did use 31,703, which is the 964. Any allocation that comes further will be on the award basis. There is a formula on how schools are awarded through SB9 and through HB 33. And the legislative appropriations, which is the 31,400, the special capital outlay state, we're still waiting the final approval on what our awards will be. The awards that we had this year were the backup generator for ESC. We had some construction improvements to the courtyard at Capitol High School. That one reverts at the end of this fiscal year, but is done. 8,000 of that will be reverting because the project actually came in less at the end than what we put the RTOF in for. So that 8,000 will revert back to the PED. We also had public safety upgrades, and that one is fully spent. I believe that one was for about 270,000. That one is done. And then we also had network upgrades, and that one is also done. So our total capital outlay budget for FY23 is budgeted at $80,138,528, which is an increase from FY22. There are 7 FTEs that come out of HB 33. It's state statute that you could only have 5% of expenditures to put towards the salaries. So that's why that one's pretty low with that kind of budget. There are also 30 FTE that come out of the educational technology note. 26 out of FY22, but being fully staffed, it would be 30. Moving on to debt service, which is the categorical funds that are used to pay principal and interest for the GO and ETN. As I mentioned, that's done twice a year, one with principal and interest and one just with interest. The GO bond schedule is about 8 to 10 years, and the ETN schedule is anywhere from 2 to 4 is what I've seen it. So the ETN note is usually paid off much sooner than the GO bond. But also, when we do sell the bond, we sell about 30 million for GO bond and about 11 million for ETN. So that's what that difference is. The budget in 41,000 and 43,000, which is debt service, includes county tax collection, bond principal payment, bond interest payment, other services, debt services reserve. And these are budgeted to the T. We do fill out a 955F to report to the PED. This year they did it for us, but it shows all of our debt schedules and what our payments are for that time frame. So these are budgeted to the actual principal and interest payment that we're going to have for this fiscal year and moving forward. The debt service budget is at 86.4. Fiscal year FY22 was budgeted at 79 million. This is the operational budget roll-up. And pretty much everything that we've talked about in the presentation today and, even the older presentation that we're going over now includes everything that we discussed. This is operational, so it includes only SEG items. The subtotal for instruction functions, support service functions, operation of non-instructional functions, and the Board of Education agreement to cover employee health insurance increased costs comes out to the $115.5 million that we generated through the SEG. Now, the operational budget, you'll see some of these are included in the roll-up of the operating because everything has to be compiled into the operating. So it might look like they're double budgeted, but they're just accounted for on the roll-up. This is the operational budget roll-up by function, and as you'll see, I'm not going to go through every line, but it includes the salaries for instruction, and that includes EAs and additional compensation, benefits, services. Moving down forward to support service functions, the support salaries in there include administrative and support staff, also benefits, professional services. You'll see, as I mentioned, that a majority of the operational SEG budget is salaries and benefits. Then the non-instructional functions, salaries, it's $10,111. That includes noon duty and non-instructional compensation. Moving forward to the operating budget roll-up, the subtotal instruction functions, the support service functions, the operation of non-instructional functions, capital outlay functions, debt service functions, and there again, the Board of Education agreement to cover employee health insurance increased costs is a budget of $301 million. Looking at those by functions, it includes the same thing as as we saw in the operational, the salaries, the benefits, broken up between instruction and support. And also in the operating budget roll-up, you'll see the capital outlay functions budgeted, the debt service functions budgeted as well. And that brings the operating budget to the $301.1 million. This is just an overview of what we received in FY22 and what we are looking at receiving in FY23. We obviously know that our special revenue will increase, but we need to budget based on actuals for the awards and allocations. And the FY22 operating budget was $326.6 million. Currently for FY23, we budgeted the $301. I have no doubt to see FY23 budget be at least $340 million. The chart on the bottom, FY23, will change throughout the year, and it'll be a similar picture to FY23, but just as those additional awards come in for the special revenue and also those few for capital outlay, it will change that chart up a little bit. Just the upcoming dates and process. We need to submit the budget to the Public Education Department June 1st, 2022 at 8 a.m. Budget adjustment request once again to address impacts to funding, which the board approves. And the budget is built by balancing out the revenues and the expenditures. And at this point, we'll stand for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martinez. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, Superintendent and team, for the much beefier narrative around this budget. Really feel like this is a much more detailed picture, and very, very glad for that. And the narrative, what you all say as we see the slides, adds a great deal. So really, really appreciate that. If we could go basically back to the start of the presentation, and we'll go through it. I have a question on slide 4. I don't know if anybody has one before that, but if not, we can go ahead and start there and go through briefly. So the 31 FTEs who are impacted, I'll just go ahead and jump right in, but obviously anybody else who wants to ask questions, please. Does that mean we basically are reducing 31 positions, but it's being absorbed by vacancies, so anybody who's employed is being plugged in?
Great question, President Noble, members of the board. 31 FTEs are impacted, and what we mean by that is we have 18 FTEs that will be absorbed. They were vacant. And so it's not a 31 total FTEs that are going to be absorbed. It's 18. 5 are district staff, 3 are sites, and again, it is due to declining enrollment. The remaining 13, and we call it impacted, is because they will be transferring to a position at another school or a different grade level. As you know, declining enrollment really does predict how we're going to staff. And so we wanted to make note that it's 31 FTEs that are impacted. We just don't want to say we're having 18 FTEs that we're going to be absorbed, because it does. We do have teachers that have to move sites or grade levels or even subjects. So we want to make sure that you guys are aware that when we do that, we will right size. We may collapse classes. For example, the new kindergarten ratio is 20-1, and I think in the past it was 22. It's 20-1 moving into next year. So if we have, 21 students, well, let's say 24 students, then we need to create 2 classes. So we'll make those adjustments when we see actual enrollment numbers next school year.
Thank you very much. But our numbers look 18 fewer for
Yes,
FY23.
you are correct.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Moving on maybe to, go ahead, Vice President Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. You look like a young guy up there.
I am a young
Yeah, I
Vice
know
President
you're
Garcia.
young. And with an MBA and overseeing a budget of, $300 and some million. Thank you doing for what you do, you and your team as well as the superintendent. Great job. You know what, and I'll put Santa Fe Public Schools, we had a hard day today. We actually gave up, how many diplomas today? I had to deal with the county budget today, another $400 million, and I'm a little tired, but however, great job what you and your team do, as well as the superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you.
In regards to the travel that we get paid reimbursed from the state. So the gas prices and stuff like that, do we get reimbursed for the higher gas prices?
We did receive it was a slight increase, and we received that a few months ago. I believe it's like 45 cents a mile. I think it was like, it went up a cent, I believe. I can't give you the exact number, but it was very small that it went up. I would expect and hope to see it go up, but I'm not sure if it necessarily will, in hopes that gas prices may come back down.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Director. And in regards to the special revenue fund that we actually get from the state, is that actually a one-time fund that we're gonna get this one time this year, or is it gonna continue? And if it's a one-time fund, how are we gonna deal with it next year or the following years?
Vice President Garcia, are you referring to the transportation fund? Oh,
Just a special revenue fund that we get, one of your slides that you had.
okay, I'll move forward.
Special revenue at 18 million.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So those include all of our grants. Some of them are maybe a 1 year, maybe a 2 year, 3 year. So that constantly changes. I mean, and dependent on how much we spend in the fiscal year and what the plan is, that affects the carryover of the next fiscal year. So some will start to go away. We also do receive new grants. I know that several cabinet members were submitting, some grants that the superintendent and I had signed, and so they do just fluctuate throughout the year.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Director.
So Vice President Garcia, we had agreed to sort of go through the presentation in a somewhat linear fashion, and you're jumping way ahead. Is that all right if we go back and go through it? Or do you want to ask all your questions now, and then the rest of the board can jump in?
Madam President, whatever you like.
Okay, just before you arrived, we'd agreed that we'd sort of go through it and then go through it in a linear fashion.
Yes, thank
So
you.
that we could, and we did, I don't remember what iteration it was, but Mr. Martinez had provided a whole list of the special revenue elements that go into that fund, which is fairly extensive.
There's over 50.
Yeah. So it's student nutrition, transportation, plus, as he mentioned, all these grants that folks all over apply for, and even city and county grants for things like crossing guards.
Madam President?
Yes, go ahead, Secretary Bozay.
Thank you. If I could just tag on to your FTE question, and I think I said this, I'm not sure I said it during one of our meetings, actually. the class sizes and the collective bargaining agreement, I know that teachers do receive a stipend when they have class sizes over what's agreed upon, and I think that that's wonderful and absolutely should be done. But I had, made a statement that I hope that that's really done as rarely as needed, because it impacts the children. And it's great to compensate the teachers for that work, but ultimately it has an impact on the kids. And so I just hope that we're doing as best we can to keep class sizes to the minimums that are agreed upon. Thank you.
And go ahead.
Secretary Bose, Madam President, members of the board, that's our goal. And, we want to be able to fill all vacancies. And when we have all vacancies filled, it really does help us level out the class load. It's only as a last resort that we provide a stipend to a overage of somebody that takes on more than the CBA allows.
And Secretary Bose, also the rollover of the software that we use, I've worked with, Business Services has worked with the HR department with both Howard and Robin, and we do the rollover much earlier so we can post those new positions for the next fiscal year. So we're hopefully able to get those positions filled to where we have the adequate staffing, moving into the next fiscal year.
Vice President
That rollover
Garcia.
is happening this weekend.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, I can't say guys, because I'm the only guy up here. But thank you, my colleagues here. I'm proud to be on the Santa Fe School Board, because, it's like being on the county commission for Santa Fe. We do very well. And with your team, we do an excellent job, and I appreciate that. So you actually talked about the employer, which is the schools, putting more money in for each individual. Is that going to happen yearly?
The board initiative to cover the employee portion.
Yes.
The board has done that since I started here. I've been here for 4.5 years. It's been a board initiative that we've worked into the budget every fiscal year. That will only continue to occur if the board decides to prioritize that and include it in the operating budget for FY24.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Superintendent. So I just want to make sure that the employees of the district know that the policymakers up here actually are providing a little bit more money in the budget to help them out when it comes to.
Correct. Superintendent Chavez actually shared with us at the last board meeting about how much of an increase was it?
About roughly 0.5%.
Correct. Which is great, because employees see more on their paycheck instead of receiving a raise and then having less money because of the increase in the employee portion of the NIMSIA costs.
Thank you. And then in regards to the pre-kindergarten initiative that the state legislature has passed, sorry I'm talking like this. I had a seizure the other day, but nonetheless. So how are we going to deal with the pre-K initiatives that the state legislature has imposed on all the school districts?
Go ahead and answer that one if you would. I think we heard last time that we've applied for more kindergarten slots for FY23 this year. They have not awarded yet,
Additional 100.
but the awards still haven't
Correct.
been granted
Approved.
yet. They're a little behind on those, I think. And I appreciate Secretary Bose's comments, and I know that Ruth and somebody taking good notes on the previous slide to this one, slide 5. I just want to make a comment that I am so pleased about what we're doing to strengthen the HR department. I know the superintendent may get tired of hearing this from me, but I really think we're in the most dynamic labor market that we've seen in a long time, probably any of our lifetimes, and that the more creative we get, the better we communicate all of these things, like the additional raise that is embedded by the board priority and keeping those insurance costs covered, the better we'll do. And just to say on the alternative licensure, anecdotally been hearing of lots of folks who are having a life moment and deciding they want to be in teaching and that sort of thing. And I'm sure we are, I trust we are, but I also just want to underline what we've learned, which is the need for mentorship and support for folks who go through the alternative licensure process. anyway, it's very exciting. And again, I know the superintendent's probably tired of me saying this, but process efficiencies, we got to look at process efficiencies. And it says here improved communications, which I think is a big one. You know, we let people know we've received their application, if there's going to be an interview, when they'll know by, because the stories of people who go and work for lesser education organizations because they say, I didn't hear anything, is also just soul crushing. But anyway, I know that we're working on that hard, and it fills my heart.
And not only am I hearing it, but our executive director in the crowd is also.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to at least slide 6, just also want to say, Mr. Martinez, I very much appreciate your comment that the department budgets are off of actuals and that you looked at things pre-pandemic. Hallelujah, because things are super weird in the pandemic, and that was going to be one of my questions, which you preempted.
Thank you.
On the next slide, again, and this is maybe the advantage of having been through a lot of budget stuff and how it's feeling good. But just to say, I hope that as we look at student social emotional needs, particularly bullying, that sort of thing, that we also look to student leadership and how we can have peer learning and students telling us what they need and what they want to do and how to do it. Because it's one thing for adults to guess and use best practices, obviously, but it's probably another thing to really engage students in that sort of grassroots work. Yes, Secretary Bozé, then Vice President Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President. Also on page 7, where we talked about the 5-year plan for increased counselors, nurses, and librarians. So am I understanding that the first number that we see there is the goal for the end of FY25, and then the second number is what we currently have in those positions?
Secretary Bozé, you are correct.
Okay. And that's also incorporated into our HR plan as far as recruiting for those positions?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
We want to recruit for all positions.
Yes. Thank you.
Madam President,
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
I'm sorry. I think Vice President Garcia had a question before. Oh, okay.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that. Thank you, Madam President. So on the same topic, the difference in the projection and the current, is that a budget issue, or is that a staffing issue, or is it both?
It's a staffing issue.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do, and I have the vacancies here. For example, we have current advertisements, but so we call them vacancies.
Okay.
Counselor vacancies at Carlos Gilbert, El Dorado, Sweeney, Tesuque, and Wood Gormley. Aide vacancies, we have them at Amy Bill and Milagro. And nurse vacancies at Nava, Milagro, Gonzalez, El Camino, Desert Sage, and Eco. And if you remember in our previous meeting, I did share with you guys that schools can share nurses, nurses' aides, counselors, so it's all dependent on school size.
Okay, that makes sense. And then are those open positions budgeted for?
They are.
Yes.
Whenever I'll go ahead, Mr.
Oh,
Martinez.
no, it's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Board Member Anderson, yeah, they are budgeted for, and it's weird the way that the process works, but they are budgeted for, and when they're vacant, it's like a PO encumbrance. Once they become filled, it encumbers that position and then starts going on year-to-date expenditures as the payrolls go by.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Did you have something on this, Vice President Garcia?
No, thank you, Madam President, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Martinez, thank you for what we do for the Santa Fe Public Schools. As all of us know today, we sat out there, and as long as our budget does good, and you're actually in charge of our budget, and you're doing very well, congratulations with the superintendent and this team. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Garcia.
So sticking with this one, do we know the breakdown between nurses and aides in terms of our current numbers?
I do. President Noble, members of the board, we currently have 16 nurses and 31 nurses aides. And speaking of librarians, we have 9 librarian specialists who are certified librarians, and we have 14 aides.
I think that's an increase in librarians, certified librarians, which is great to hear.
It is.
And counselors are counselors. Okay, and I just know that former board member Cashman and former board member Lorraine Price would say that, you know, we want to push for nurses and full librarians, so I'll keep saying that as well. Well, the counselors are counselors, and we've got the numbers there, so thank you. Okay, moving swiftly along. I don't know if anybody's got, I did note on slide 9, I just wanted to say.
Madam
Oh,
President?
yes, go ahead, Dr. Gonzalez.
On slide 8, I assume that the peer navigators are going to be located at the high schools?
Board Member Gonzalez, members of the board, you are correct.
And I just wanted to note on slide 9 with the Capstone Projects, I love this, what we're doing around graduation. I love this. The class at Santa Fe High was very large, 369 today, 59? Okay, 359, which is, I think it was right around 300 last year. And it's just, of course, it's graduation week. It feels really, really good to see all of this sort of come to fruition and the joy in the graduates and their families and community. It is just incredible. And we hope, stronger graduation numbers by the raw numbers. And my, informal estimates, it looks good. Thank you.
Thank you, President Noble. May I add that, I want to give a lot of credit to our team that developed the Capstone Project very quickly, and we're one of the few districts that has it in place to really provide to our students.
Great. Madam President?
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
Thank you, Madam President. I just had a question on slide 9. So you mentioned that the 80th and 120th days, those will determine our funding. Like if it goes up or down, then our SEG will go up or down?
Board Member Anderson, that is correct. That is only on operational, and it only happens one time a year.
Okay, got it. So if we have a big drop next year, what happens to, are there shortfalls in the budget, or how does that get sort of changed around?
Board Member Anderson, we're able to project our increase, and the only thing that's tough on doing so is if we over-project that, then we have to pay that money back, which I think would really offset our budget more than anything. If Superintendent Chavez has anything more to add, feel free to, but.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Absolutely, and that's why it's very important to have a cash balance around the board policy, just in case we have those fluctuations. So we'll continue to work and project out, so we're staying within our budget and we don't go backwards. But again, it's very important for that cash balance to be at an appropriate level so we can maintain whenever we have these fluctuations.
Great, thank you so much.
Madam President, really
Go
quick,
ahead, Vice President.
what's the requirement from Public Education Department for our cash reserves? Is it 10%, 5%?
Vice President Garcia, it's 3%.
Thank you.
And our board policy is 5%.
Correct.
And Desert Sage is going to continue as an online option, kindergarten through 12?
You are correct. Just a little bit of background on Desert Sage. We were able to get that off the ground utilizing our ESSER funding. As you know, when we start new programs or new schools, we're funded next year on current numbers. So Desert Sage did not have current numbers, or their numbers were at 70. They are at close to 550 students as we speak. Next year, they have generated their funding through 80th and 120th day, so now they have their own operational budget.
Madam President?
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
I just wanted to make a comment that I was so impressed with Desert Sage yesterday, and with their principal and with their culture and with their valedictorian speech. It was just all really fantastic. So kudos on getting that off the ground.
Okay, moving forward to slide 10. Slide 11.
Madam President, if I could just ask a quick question on slide 10.
Of course, go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the next to last bullet point, that the school-age population will grow slightly into 2040. Does this mean, I think I did my math right, the 2040 is when the folks who are born today will be seniors in high school. Does that mean that like each year we're going to, until 2040, we'll see growth, or does that mean that, I'm not sure I'm understanding totally.
Yeah, good question, Board Member Anderson. It is projected off the Facilities Master Plan, and it's slight growth. And I want to make sure we understand that because we don't know what that growth is going to look like. So yes, slight growth between the ages of 5 and 10 into 2040.
President, I don't know if you're going to still be here in 2040, but hopefully you're still a board member.
Madam President?
Go ahead, Secretary Bizet.
Thank you. On slide 11, I had a question about our Chromebooks, and I'm glad to hear that we're buying equipment that can be utilized to meet the needs. That's certainly preferred. But I am curious over how many years these devices are used.
Certainly, Madam President, Board Member Bosis, Superintendent, our Chromebooks typically will last between 3 and 4 years. We're averaging 3.5 years, but we're seeing more life than that.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I was going to say on slide 11, and particularly slide 12 with that bullet point at the end, just it's what we've done. Dr. Weaver, I cannot say enough good things about your leadership and the fact that we are staying ahead of current needs. And we saw how valuable that was as we entered the pandemic. And we hope we'll not need technology in the same way again, but we know we need technology. So thank you, and I hope we can also continue to maybe even carve out time to get national recognition for some of this, because we really have done some amazing stuff.
Just, Madam President, just add to that, Dr. Weaver, as into La Cienega, whenever we had in 2019, when the pandemic first started, we had no internet service over there, and you guys are on it. And you guys got internet service to individuals there in La Cienega because we're in the valley down there. And great job, though. Like as the president said, thank you. And your team as well.
Thank you.
Moving on to slide 12 with my favorite bullet point at the bottom. And slide 13.
Board President Noble.
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
I had just a quick question. What does student mobility mean?
President Noble, members of the board, student mobility is looking at trends if kids are moving from one school site to another. So it's just keeping check on that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
What happened to our at-risk units from whatever last year to the most current year we have?
President Noble, I shared that on the May 5th meeting, but I can pull that up real quick. And I should have had it up. So our at-risk for FY22, our units were 2,167.424, which generated funding of 10.5 million. And then our FY23 units for at-risk were 1,835.242 and generated 10,003,757.32 cents, which was a decrease of 332.18 units, which calculated out to a decrease of 536,425.59 The at-risk index also went down in the FY22 fiscal year from 0.170 versus the 1.64, and membership also went down.
Thank you very much. And the decrease to FY23, you said, was just over $500,000?
Just a little over 500,000, 536.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. It's not as big as I would have expected with those unit numbers. Okay, slide 14. Getting into the Title I stuff, this was great. I learned more about Title I than I have in a while. Anything here? Slide 15.
Oh, Board President Noble.
Go ahead, Board
Thank you.
Member Anderson.
I have a question about Title I, and I don't know if it's better here or when we get into the site funding, but I'll go ahead and ask it here if that's okay. How much of Title I funding is determined at a district level, and how much is determined at a site level in terms of usage? Did I state that question correctly? Did that make sense? Okay.
Board Member Anderson, President Noble, members of the board. Again, it's based off of that formula, so whatever student numbers you have at your site that qualify for Title I funding, they receive that funding. And so it's our job, mine and Mr. Martinez's, to ensure that the schools are receiving that Title I funding to address the needs of those students who qualify.
Okay, I think I might have a different question. Thank you so much for that. Are there programmatic decisions made at a district level in terms of Title I versus like a site choosing a reading interventionist or that kind of thing? Does that, okay.
It does. Deputy Superintendent Romero?
Sure, President Noble, members of the board. So about 1.577 million flows to school sites, and typically they choose to hire an FTE, and a lot of that time it's for an interventionist or for an additional teacher at the school to help out. So I think according to Ryan, she said about 1.3 million is based on salary and FTE.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, moving along, slide 16. Our $10 million roughly of at-risk funding. Slide 17. Slide 18. So the site budgets will be, I think I'm understanding this, but basically, if you could say a little bit more about what will happen with SACs in the next school year with the budgets. And I understand that some things are locked, and I appreciate that breakdown of what is unlocked or flexible and available for some input and work with SACs. But ultimately, my question is sort of what will happen as we say, SACs will reconvene next school year to provide input into site budgets.
And Madam President, if you can tell us what SACs, I know what SACs are, but for the general public, what are SACs?
President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. Each school site has a school advisory council, and that's what it is, and it's comprised of teachers, parents, community members, even students in like our secondary schools. And typically what happens, as mentioned, there are positions that are locked. So every school is guaranteed a classroom teacher or the classroom FTEs, a principal, a secretary, the counselor, nurse's aide. So those are things we budget the schools with. And then with the funds that are left over, so typically there are funds left over a little bit for operational, and schools can determine if they want to put it in professional development or buy additional books or classroom libraries. And then, of course, they get some Title I funds. This year, they received, on average, about $35,000 in ESSER funds. And so at that point, then you can go to your SAC and have these conversations like, oh, we have $35,000 in ESSER funds. What are the priorities to the school community and how should we spend those funds? Or we have $15,000 in Title I or for an FTE. How should we spend it on FTE or should we spend it on programming or books or professional development for the school site?
Board President Noble. I just wanted to make a comment that these slides were really, really helpful. I really appreciate you putting these in here. It was really helpful to see how things move around at the site level. So thank you very much.
Madam President?
Go ahead, Secretary Jose.
Thank you. I am also curious about how SACs, like I understand these certain items are locked. Can SACs add to cells that are locked? Like, say that music was a priority and they have, you know, whatever they have that's been allocated as far as music or art. Can they say, we want more of this, so we're going to put these funds aside to go towards that program?
President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, they can if they have budget in their operational allocation, or they can look at title funds, or they can look at ESSER funds and utilize to add an additional 0.2 FTE or 1 day or 2 days of band or music. But we do guarantee that, yeah, there's music and PE and art across the district. So we do guarantee that we have those programs, and those are locked.
Thank you.
Madam President,
Go ahead.
you and I actually dealt with some SACs on the south side of town. What's our SACs are actually like the PTA. So how often do schools have SAC meetings?
President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, the requirement by state statute is quarterly. So at the end of every quarter, but we have school sites that meet monthly with their SACs.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. It's kind of like the PTA, right? Back in the days?
It's comprised of members that are on PTA. They decide to also be part of the SAC. The SAC is also, I think the priority is mainly to look at site programming and how to enhance student achievement and site programming. PTCs and PTOs look at activities and events and how to organize and raise money for a school.
And to add an aspirational comment, I hope we do this really robustly. This is a great way to build engagement at school sites, is when it feels like there's real resources and engagement around that.
Madam President,
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
I'll just say that sometimes being involved in a SAC might lead you to run for school board, so do be careful.
It's a gateway substance. All right, moving on. Keep going, please. We now have our bilingual and multicultural education funds. Again, love this slide. Really appreciate also that we're working on covering the costs and not putting that on folks who are getting their TESOL and bilingual endorsement. Really appreciate that. I'm sorry? We're now on slide 21. Family Income Index. Keep going. Excellent explanations
Noble?
there. Yes, Board Member
They are
Anderson.
excellent explanations. I just had a question about the phrase evidence-based. Do we get to define evidence-based, or is that defined in statute? Okay.
I'm trying to prevent from calling you Board President Anderson again.
Please, no.
Yes. Deputy Superintendent Romero.
President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, evidence-based is based on pedagogy and best practices and what has been researched, looking at curriculum, making sure that it's sound curriculum.
And I do want to add, the state is starting to go against that word of evidence-based and just calling it evidence or providing professional development. It used to be saying evidence-based professional development. Now it's just professional development. So it's starting to become a little more flexible.
Madam
For
President,
so long, it wasn't even used, and then it started being used in bills and all that, and so it's very standard in the legislature.
Go ahead, Vice President Garcia.
you're right, it should be called evidence-based because those schools are in my district, and I grew up off of Airport Road. And And today, whenever we actually handed out diplomas, it was awesome to see individuals actually receive their diploma. Just like broke my heart, like, cool, but it should be changed. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, may I add?
Please.
Just want to remind you, Family Income Index, this year, we had Cesar Chavez receiving it. Next year, it's Salazar. So that's the only change within the funding of the Family Income Index for Santa Fe Public Schools.
Okay, moving on to our mill levy. Senate Bill 9, we don't know what year. We could probably do the research. House Bill 33, but ultimately our two mill levy funds. Appreciate this. And some of us have received some emails about concerns for cuts in music budgets. Just wondering, Superintendent, if you might sort of outline for us what's going on and how this is approached in the budget.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. As we walked you through this slide, it could appear as a reduction in their budget. And as Mr. Martinez mentioned, he and his team have worked and looked at the previous years to budget off of actuals. So we know that equipment may cost X amount, and so we're going to budget off of that. However, there will be some flexibility because we understand that prices are increasing across the board, not only for staffing, but also for anything under the sun. So we understand that we will base it off of actuals over the last few years, but we also know that we need to provide flexibility in case costs increase.
President Noble, if I may as well, in looking at the actual expenditures, we also look at the repair and the replacement schedule provided by the music department. So any adjustments in the actual mill levy budget that they do get was based solely on that. But, if any additional needs, we would definitely make sure that, whether it be mill levy or another funding source, that the needs of the students were met to participate in those programs.
Thank you very much. Vice President Garcia?
Thank you, Madam President. You guys mentioned House Bill 33. You guys said there's 17 FTEs. So who determines where those FTEs go?
Vice President Garcia, there's 7 FTE, and as I mentioned, it's only 5% of expenditures, but it has to be directly relative to the HB 33 fund. So our project managers are, some of the project managers are taken out. Some of them are split funded, maybe operational and HB 33, because we have to make sure we stay within that 5%, but it has to be directly correlated to the project or the specificity of the fund.
Thank you, Madam President.
And of course, we know that music, art, athletics, among other specials, often keep students engaged, and particularly in music and art, probably also in athletics, but we do have sort of community schools opportunities because we have an incredibly rich artistic and musical community. And just to say out loud, if we can always push forward for more partnerships for performance spaces and the other things that we might not have in spades in Santa Fe Public Schools facilities. We do have, of course, great upgrades in our facilities coming, driven by the facilities master plan, but for music and art, there can, I'm sure, always be more purpose-built facilities, and it'd be great to have more. I know we have a lot already, integration with some of the resources in the community, but ever more is good too.
Madam President.
Go ahead, Secretary Bozay.
Thank you. If I can just dig a little bit deeper on that mill levy piece, as far as the music department, the numbers that were brought to me is that in the last 4 years, the mill levy funds to the music department have been reduced by 40%. For next year, 25% of that 40% is in next year's. And so I guess I'm having a hard time, and I think one of the concerns that was brought forward is that previously, prior to this last 4 years, that there was an abundance of kind of inexpensive instruments, perhaps we could make the parallel to our Chromebooks, like they're not really meeting the needs of the students, and so you have quantity over quality, and because these, this budget is being reduced that way, they're not able to enhance the instruments in the way that they would like them to be enhanced, and, you know, so I think like looking at actuals, if that's a system that isn't really working for the department, is maybe something that could be looked at again. Thank you.
Secretary Bose, I will say, you know, in meeting with the department, when I came on board and the mill levy budget was much larger for music, they did not have a software that tracked their inventory. That was done by the department, the finance department, and we do not run a repair and replacement schedule. In conversations of building the budget over the course of time with the music department, like I said, we have to run a repair and a replacement schedule. Also, when the pandemic hit, a lot of the PPE expenditures had to be transitioned over from mill levy to ensure that whether the signage in the schools, masks, anything for PPE, that we were able to provide that. So, you know, there have been other allocations for air purifiers and whatnot to come in and alleviate some of the expenditures that came from mill levy because of the pandemic, but we still absorbed a lot out of mill levy. So we had to make adjustments all around. And it was by looking at the repair and the replacement schedule, and it was by looking at the expenditures that we made those recommendations. As I mentioned, music also receives operational funding and mill levy funding. Music is the only department that actually has a solidified budget built in mill levy. But it's a great concern.
Thank you.
Vice President Garcia?
Thank you, Madam President. Just, and I totally agree with the music aspect of it. In my district, my areas, just communication. You know, we need to talk about kids as, you want to play a trumpet, you want to play the saxophone, you want to play guitar. And if there is mill levy money for that, and some districts actually want to do, want to perform the music, just as long as the district, the superintendent, as well as yourself, are actually talking to everybody out there and say, you know what, we have money set aside for music, but I think that's important. Thank you, Madam President.
And Secretary Bose, just moving back, you know, one thing that the district does not do that I have been a part of in previous employment is mid-year budget reviews. And that's something that I have proposed to several departments, you know, being fully staffed in business services, that we have the staff to make sure that we have a really good tracking mechanism on each fund, each budget. I mean, we always have, but really being able to take the time to meet one-on-one with departments and even regrouping around mid-year just to see kind of what their expenditures are looking like in FY23, if there's going to be more resources or funding needed, or maybe less, or maybe they expected that they would need more, but with what they were budgeted with, they were adequately funded. So it is definitely something that I want to bring to the table of the district to really have that transparency, and for me to know that everyone's taken care of.
Thank you. That sounds really
course.
lovely.
Okay, next slide, student nutrition. Do we have any update as to whether our, whatever, the title includes managers, yeah, cafeteria managers are, come under the NEA umbrella?
President Noble, members of the board, both myself and President Grace Mayer have signed, and they will become part of the union July 1st.
Wonderful. That's great news. Thank you. And this is also my plug to say, I might say it again on one of these other slides, but I know we need to look at our recurring money, which is really our SEG, and what's embedded in there and versus our non-recurring money, of course, the ESSER funds. But I do hope we can figure out how to pay people more, especially those who make the least. And many of them are in student nutrition as well as transportation, and of course EAs and school secretaries, and yes, and custodial, of course. I think a lot of that is done through contract now. I don't know how much
Part
we,
of it,
yeah. But ultimately, you know, looking again, it's just a little bit of a bully pulpit moment is how we can pay, particularly those people who make the least more. I know we have a new $15 minimum wage. Again, wild in the streets labor market, and places are paying 18, 22, somebody said for Target the other day. So we have a good schedule and great benefits, we know that. But of course, paying people a better wage is certainly a goal to strive for.
And President Noble, members of the board, we're currently in the middle of negotiations on those employee groups, looking at salaries, benefits. So it's ongoing with our lead negotiator, Ms. Deputy Superintendent Vanessa Romero, and her team. But that is currently going on, and that is right in the middle of negotiations.
Board President Noble?
Yes, Board Member Anderson, then Vice President Garcia.
Thank you. I just have a question on slide 23 for student nutrition. Do we know what's going to happen? I know well, I mean, at least in my understanding, the federal government provided free lunch to all students this year. Do we know if that program will be happening next year and what impact it might have on our funding in student nutrition?
Board Member Anderson, members of the board, it will not be free next year. However, we have enough schools and students that will qualify for who qualify under free and reduced lunch, and so we'll be able to offer that moving forward. Some will have to pay, but it's not a lot of our students that do have to pay that do not qualify. But no free lunches across the district next year.
Board President Noble, that was my question also. I was gonna, I was pleased to see how many more meals were served. In my household, that was 3 additional students that were eating school lunches that had never had school lunches before because of that great federal program. So I'm disappointed that it's not continuing, and hopefully those numbers stay up. Thank you.
Vice President Garcia, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam President. Just to add to that, Pam Roy, who actually is a huge advocate at the state legislature for Fresh to Table. We get some money for fresh produce that actually is grown, and I'll give credit to my neighbors, the Dixons, who actually own the Green Tractor Farm, which is probably one of the top 5 individuals at the farmer's market. But nonetheless, there are kids out there that actually, they're a little bit hungry. And everything else in regards to eating and feeding and paying the individuals. But it's sad whenever I see kids in my district, and it makes me hurt whenever I see them like, really? You're hungry? Yes, I'm hungry. But nonetheless, this is very important, actually, nutrition for students. Thank you.
President Noble, may I add?
Please.
Thank you. And we have a schedule out for summer feeding programs or food programs. And so it's out on our website. We've sent it out to all families. And so again, want to make sure that everybody understands that there are locations out there, and it is for free food over the summer.
And Superintendent Chavez, if I may add, the food service student nutrition program does receive, I believe, about 2 to 3 special revenue funds, and one of them is a produce for one of the allocations.
Thank you. Anything on transportation? We heard Secretary Garcia or Vice President Garcia's question about the increase in fuel, which is of course covered on this slide here as well, which is good to see.
I just want to add one thing, just so you guys are aware. It's very important that you guys are aware of our ridership and how we're funded. During the pandemic, a lot of families had the ability to drop off and pick up their students. And so we want to encourage anybody out there listening, please ride our buses, because it does help our funding. Currently, we have seen a decrease in membership, so hopefully next year we see an increase.
Board President Noble?
Go ahead, Board Member Anderson.
Thank you, Board President Noble. This is kind of totally out of left field, but we had talked, you and I, Superintendent Chavez, like right when I came on the board, about the possibility of transportation in between zones, and I wonder if maybe we might continue that conversation and see how that impacts ridership and also impacts our budget in particular, because I know that that would be an increased cost.
Yeah, great question, and we want to explore all possibilities because we need to increase rider membership.
Hallelujah. Vice President Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President. Just in regards to transportation, my grandma actually passed away about 10 days ago, and my uncle came from San Diego, and about 7 years ago, my uncle was on the union for the schools in San Diego about 7 years ago. They said, we're not doing any transportation at all. And they cut off every single transportation in San Diego County. And I think that we do a great job in handling transportation and through our budget and what we do. People from Madrid, when my kids come from Madrid in the morning, when it's dark, and when the times change, but I think we did an excellent job of transportation. As long as we continue to do transportation, actually, that's a great job. But thank you, Madam President. Thank you.
So these are our carryover slides. This is really the budget that we are considering tonight. The noteworthy impacts, of course, are a great summary of what we're doing. On our operational budget balancing overview, always appreciate this slide, but just want to highlight this year what Mr. Martinez already highlighted. We're getting our cash balance back to our board policy level, and I'm so glad to see that. It's been something that's been much discussed at the audit committee, and appreciate, Mr. Martinez, you and your team doing the work to make sure we can get there.
Thank you.
Anything else on this slide? And again, moving forward into special revenue, just to call out what Mr. Martinez has already said, but we will adopt a budget based on what we have currently. This is what we need to do for special revenue, but we do anticipate that it'll be closer to FY22. So we may see $45 million more in special revenue. And, you know, if there was ever a reason to watch the bars that come through, this is it. We may have $45 million more revenue as we go, particularly in this catch-all special revenue category.
Correct. And President Noble, if I may,
Please.
just, and the board may already know this, but any time you see a bar on the consent that has a 0 next to what the fund is and what the description is, that represents that it's a maintenance or a transfer. Anytime you see a plus and a number, that is going to be either an increase or an initial budget. An initial budget is if we received a new award. An increase would be like the fuel allocation that we just received for FY22, just the adjustment. I believe it was like $70-some thousand. And then the decrease would be negative in front of the number, but just wanted the board to know that.
Madam President.
Go ahead.
So what does the board have to see, over $50,000 that we have to approve, or under 50, or how does that work?
Vice President Garcia, are you talking about contracts? I believe we recently moved, okay, it's 60,000, yes.
Yeah,
I was
the
going to
board
say, I believe we removed
So there are
that.
two different things. The contracts over $60,000 require board approval, but I believe budget adjustments of any amount.
Any kind. Any
amount,
kind.
$100 or $2 or $0 in order to do maintenance bars, and those are often the most numerous.
And it's always rounded. There's no sense. Just to let you know.
Yeah. All right, anything else on special revenue? Capital outlay, Thank you, board members, staff members, community members for your service on the CRC that oversees this and does the meat of the work. And just a call out, because the draft agenda that I was reading from earlier does have us looking at our own appointments at CRC, Audit, Partners in Education, and to the NMSBA School Boards Association next week. So we can think about that and what we want to do.
Madam President.
Yes, Vice President.
I would just like to thank everybody today for going to, some may or may not been able to make the graduation, but Mr. Morano, you raised those kids. And when all those kids went up to you and hugged you and said, Mr. Morano, we love you, that was cool. And because for the last 3 or 4 years, you raised those boys and girls. Good job, my friend. Thank you.
And some
Madam
of them might not even identify as boys or girls, but yes. There we go. Okay, our operational budget roll-up comes next. Again, this is where we have sort of the most discretion. Operational budget roll-up by another stripe is on slide 33.
Madam President, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
We skipped over 31, or I mean, I didn't
Oh,
jump
I'm
in
sorry.
in time.
Yeah,
'Cause I was-
just whatever we need to do.
Yes. And I had this question last week and I forgot to ask it. In the other services category, can you tell me what that is that's on FY '23 that wasn't on FY '22, please?
The other services is part of some of the bond closing that take place. And it's just, there's a portion that needs to go to debt service to be paid out after the closing, it's fees. And it wasn't budgeted in FY '22, so we did a bar
Okay.
that the board approved.
Okay.
And it actually adjusted the budget so we could reflect that on the general ledger, but I went ahead and
That sounds
budgeted
familiar.
it this year, so we don't have to do the bar.
Okay,
Just if I know it's coming, yep.
thank you.
Of course, Secretary Bozay.
Okay, sorry. Now we can look at the operational budget by function. And then moving on to the operating budget, if there's nothing on the operational budget. The operating budget is $301,165,713 is the budget that is before us tonight. So, just to call that out. And we have it sliced a couple different ways in terms of the roll-ups, including nice colored pie charts, which again, we see our special revenue being smaller in FY '23 because we are budgeting what we know. Anything else here?
Madam President,
Yes, Vice President Garcia.
I think this community, actually, the entire team, from the superintendent to us policymakers, to the budget administrators, the deputy superintendents, to the entire staff, as into from the assessor's office to Santa Fe County, actually bringing in the revenue as well as having a AAA plus bond rating, Santa Fe County, because we can go borrow money on what we need to do. I think the entire community as a whole, I think the budget's great, and great job, Mr. Superintendent, my colleagues up here, as well as every deputy superintendent up there, and all the individuals that work for the schools. Thank you.
I'd like to go ahead and move approval of the 2022-2023 operating budget.
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. You get to vote, but you don't get to third. Any further discussions, questions, comments?
Board President Noble, oh, you go ahead.
I just, President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, members of the board, I just want to thank the superintendent and Mr. Martinez and the members of the staff. I thought this presentation was really great. It was very thoughtful and organized. I thought the explanations that you provided were really, really helpful for us all. So thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Board President Noble.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Gonzalez took the words out of my mouth, but I'm going to say them anyway. I really appreciate the work that you put into, particularly the entire budget, but this week was really exceptional. I am a new board member, and this is one of the first really big thing that I've been a part of. I mean, they're all big things. The bars are great, Robert. I'm not trying to say anything, you know. Oh, sorry, Mr. Martinez. Sorry, apologies. But this is a really big monumental thing, $301 million. And so I appreciate you walking us through this and giving us all of the information we need. This presentation was really exceptional. It gave a lot of context to the numbers, which is really helpful for me. I was an English major, so the words are great for me. So I just appreciate you. I appreciate everyone who put their time into this, and thank you. And I'm really excited to pass this budget.
Thank you.
Madam President,
Go ahead, Secretary Bonet.
I'm going to say it as well. Thank you. Thank you to all of you and your teams. I appreciate everything that you put together in the last week. I know that was short notice. It was a lot of work. It's evident how much you put into it, and it gave us just so much more context, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will also say, I think I said it earlier, appreciation, I know that, but I also really am glad that we have a full board to do this. And just to say, it would have probably felt, I don't know, itchy, but a little uncomfortable to pass a budget without the full board. And I really appreciate that we're all here and all of the work that it took during a busy week when we all just want to be experiencing the joy of graduation to dig in and do this. So thank you. It's graduation week. Okay, we have a motion to approve the 2022-2023 operating budget and a second. Any further discussion? Comments? Victory laps? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. We've passed the budget. Please, Mr. Martinez, go ahead.
Thank you, President Noble. If I may, I want to thank Cabinet, Superintendent, the executive team, but most importantly, I want to thank the staff of Business Services in really pulling together with the new staff and coming in and hitting the ground running. But I will honestly say that I believe Business Services has the best team that I've seen in the 4.5 years. It's reflected in the audit. It's reflected in the compilation of the budget. So I just definitely want to give them a special shout out, because without them, this wouldn't have been possible. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
And thank you guys for passing it.
That does deserve applause. Okay, advanced planning, tomorrow morning at Capitol High School, 9 a.m., lining up, I'm guessing, right about 8:30 type of thing,
In the gym.
in the gym. We will have a meeting next week on June 2nd. It looks like we won't have an executive session.
No.
Okay, so just 5:30 next week. Anything else on advanced planning?
If I can, Madam
Please,
President.
yeah.
I just want to call out July 18th. Let me, I had it on my notes. July 18th is our summer graduation at Capitol High School. We will let you know what time it's gonna start, but this year, we're gonna start a rotation during summer high school's graduation. Last year was at Desert Sage. Next year, or this summer, we'll be at Capitol High School, and then the following will be at Santa Fe. So July 18th.
And a reminder to board members, this is the time of year, maybe we can get some help, superintendent from Ms. Bahar or whomever, but to file for your per diem. Because we need to do that by the end of June. Well, no, technically we're volunteers, but we do get per diem. Okay, Vice President Garcia says he's not taking his per diem. All right, and we'll be here again, and we will have a study session on the 9th, which will be on our redistricting options, 3 of them, I believe. Okay, anything else? Happy birthday, Dr. Gonzalez. had a better
Way
singing
to
voice.
way to spend my birthday, huh?
Thank you for being here with us.